Hey, Bruce, this is Wendy. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Awesome.
Good afternoon, Bruce.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you again for organizing that meeting earlier.
Yeah, that was pretty good, wasn't it? I thought we got some good feelings out of that.
Yeah, I'm worried to know what the pricing is because I'm
Yeah,
already excited, you know.
yeah, exactly. Hello, Mr. Arth.
Good evening, sir.
As I mentioned to Matthew, I've got a 51st high school reunion coming up next week, and I wanted to kind of modify my quarantine and stay out of in-person meetings till I get back. So,
Where'd you go to high school?
Illinois, outside Chicago, about 50 miles outside Chicago. Cornfields. That's where I got my sense of humor. Cornfields.
Okay.
Evening, Blake.
Hey, howdy, everybody.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Blake.
Good to see everybody.
We waited a few moments for Councilwoman Lucchese, unless anyone's heard from her.
I have heard from her. She will join as soon as she can.
Okay. Via Zoom.
Maybe, I'm not sure. There's some special meeting tonight, Marika.
Okay. Well, we do have a quorum, so I guess I'll call if you're ready, Wendy.
Yeah, I'm ready. Go ahead.
Let's call the meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. June 16th, 2022. Secretary Hughes, would you like to lead us in the flag salute? You got it. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The agenda did have a closed session item that was supposed to take place earlier. That item was canceled for this evening, so there's nothing to report from that. Brings us to roll call.
Councilmember Arth.
Here.
Councilmember Deutsch.
Here.
Councilmember Heisler.
Excused.
Councilmember Lucchese.
Not here at this moment.
And Mayor Bryan.
Present. All right, for tonight, we have our first regular attendance of our town historian to update us on some context for the history of our town. You come to the podium, Ron.
After the meeting at which I was promoted to this lofty position, I had a conversation with Councilman Arth, and he made a comment that kind of stuck with me. He said, while he was listening to me chatter on about the history of this building, he was looking at the blank wall, a big blank wall back here, and spots in other places. He says, wouldn't it be nice if we had some nice historical pictures on those walls? So I went digging in my archives, and I've come up with 3 that I think would look really nice in here that I would offer to the city if there's enough money in the budget to have them framed. And if the city wants them, welcome to them. There's one in particular that I wanted to use to illustrate a little story that I want to tell you about Dunsmuir. This is one of the very few pictures that exists showing the Alexander Dunsmuir fountain in its original format. There aren't many pictures that show it. It's over here, and you can see it fairly plainly. The big thing in this picture, however, is the Mount Shasta Hotel on the right-hand side.
Ron, can we show it to the camera right there? Because that's where Blake is, and I'm not sure Blake can.
Could you go more to the center there, Ron, a little bit to your left? Yeah, there, no.
So this is the camera, Ron, so if you want to try to kind of walk a couple steps towards me. There you go. Okay, now
There.
lift it up real tight. There you go. I don't know if, we probably can't see much detail because it's so far away.
Really cool.
It's nice. I can see it. We can see it from here. That's nice, Ron.
Beautiful.
Anyway, in doing the research that I'm always fiddling around with on the history of Dunsmuir and looking at the fountain, which is a big important thing in our history, it was delivered in October of 1888. And there was an article in the North Star newspaper that same month saying that the fountain had been delivered, was being constructed, and water for the fountain was going to be supplied by Mr. Billicky of the Mount Shasta Hotel. So they're going to run a pipe from the hotel down to the fountain. And I tuned into that name, and it's an unusual name, Billicky, B-I-L-I-C-K-E. It's a German name, I believe. I don't remember encountering that name anyplace in any of the archives or anything in the town of Dunsmuir or this area. I quickly found out there wasn't a Mr. Billicky, as the newspaper referred to him. There were actually two Mr. Billickys. There was Charles, who was born in Germany in 1831, and his son Albert, who was born in 1861 in Oregon. Charles Billicky moved to the gold fields in Idaho in the 1850s and pretty much struck it rich. He wasn't a miner. He dealt in all the supplies for miners and did quite well. So well that he retired young and moved his family to San Francisco. And Albert and his sister went to public schools in San Francisco, and a terrible thing happened there, though. There was a run on the bank, which was holding all of Charles' assets, and it went under, and he basically lost everything. But being resourceful, he knew the gold mining business, and so he headed for headed for Arizona, which was a hot spot at that point in time. In 1879, Albert joined his father in Arizona, and the two of them were in businesses in a couple of the communities there, but in 1879 they moved to Tombstone and built the first hotel in Tombstone called the Cosmopolitan. Interestingly enough, also at about that same time in 1879, there were four brothers who moved into Tombstone. Their names were Morgan, Virgil, James, Warren, and Wyatt. Wyatt Earp, plus his friend Doc Holliday. Strangely enough, the Cosmopolitan Hotel became their headquarters. They pretty much occupied it. That's where they hung out during the daytime and probably all night long too. There was a nice bar, a restaurant, plenty of room to lounge around. The Billickys became quite close to the Earps and joined with them in several business ventures and in mining projects, basically. You've all read the stories of the shootout at the OK Corral. You've seen the movies and so on, so we don't need to talk about that, but it happened, and the Billickys were involved. Albert was called to testify after the big shootout in defense of the Earps, and testified that their opponents were in fact armed and dangerous and needed to be dealt with. 7 months after the shootout, another major fire destroyed the Cosmopolitan Hotel and 16 other businesses. The Billickys, I think, realized at that point that Tombstone wasn't the nice, friendly place they thought it was originally. It was a very tense environment. And so they moved to California, left Tombstone behind. And they engaged in the hotel and mining business in Central and Southern California. We don't know for sure when they came to Dunsmuir, but it was probably in 1886 or 1887. And they built the Mount Shasta Hotel. Mount Shasta Hotel, as you can see in this picture, was a 3-story building, wood frame, had 40 rooms, had a ballroom, an elegant restaurant and bar. It was right across the street from the depot. So it was very popular with travelers coming in and out by train. On April 5th of 1903, there was a major fire in Dunsmuir. It started in the Mount Shasta Hotel. It destroyed the hotel, all of the businesses on Sacramento Avenue, and several homes on Dunsmuir Avenue. That property was purchased by Abner Weed, who built the Weed Hotel, which has now evolved into the Dunsmuir Hotels, which Mr. Juarez knows about. Charles had passed away in 1896, but Albert and his family returned to Southern California, where he became quite prosperous in hotel business. Left Dunsmuir behind and never returned, as far as we know. In 1915, Albert was recovering from some surgery that he had, and he booked passage on a ship to Europe with his wife Gladys. And interestingly enough, the name of the ship was the Lusitania. Lusitania was torpedoed by a German submarine. 1,198 people died, including Albert. His body was never found. Albert survived and lived out of the ripe old age of 70-something in the 1940s. Albert's estate, after his death, was valued at $8 million. That's in 1915 dollars. Just a fascinating little story, I think. The other pictures that I have, one of which shows the Mount Shasta Hotel. This would have been in 1887, under construction.
Very cool, Ron.
See it okay? The hotel opened in late 1887 or 1888. This was probably taken in 1887. The other picture I have is a panorama of Dunsmuir, and there are a lot of these taken over the years from.
Was that the Mount Shasta Hotel been opened in 1887, you said?
Late 1887 or 1888. It's up here.
And as you pointed out, it was the Mount Shasta Hotel before there was even a city of Mount Shasta.
I believe so.
It's called Sisson.
System. This is a panorama view of the town about the same time. You can see Mount Shasta Hotel in this picture, as well as the Alexander Dunsmuir Fountain, and of course the roundhouse in the foreground. Anyway, I will leave these for the city to consider. I think that they would make nice additions to this room, and I think people would enjoy seeing them.
Thank you so much, Ron.
Sure.
And if
Would it
you
be
want to,
possible that we could take photographs or copies of them and put them in the hotel since it's not a hotel?
do you want to remain in possession of them until we organize?
I can do that.
Just because you've kept them safe for.
Sure.
Councilman
Well, we have a framing service in town, Lindsay Budner Elemental Framing at the museum. So if we have a chain of custody, if someone in the city can deliver, 3 sort of came up as a nice number, but Lindsay's very good at framing historical stuff.
Yes,
I would be happy to pay for the framing.
I
Thank you,
can,
Councilman.
I can take care of the transfer. I can take care of the transfer if you want to drop them off at City Hall. Okay.
Very generous, Ron.
Thank you. And thank you for the research. It's amazing how one individual can be in so many known historical places and yet still found Dunsmuir. Let's move into public comment, general public comment for this evening. Anyone who would like to make a public comment on anything not on this agenda, so anything generally or anything that's on the consent agenda, please come up to the podium. You'll be allotted 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. If you're on Zoom, hit the raise your hand button. Is there anyone in the room that would like to go?
So it looks like a Laurel Harkness on Zoom. So Laurel, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much. Hey, everybody. I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation. Nice to learn a little bit about the history. minutes and introduce myself, although I've met many of you in the community in the past. Again, I'm Laurel Harkness, and I am working now with the California Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. I am the Regional Economic Recovery Coordinator for the North State, which is a 10-county region. So it's Siskiyou, Trinity, down to Butte, Glen, and over to Sierra County and Plumas, Lassen, Modoc, and kind of anything I missed in the middle there. I am based in Mount Shasta, and I've been here 20 years. And I just wanted to let you know I'd be happy to meet with you either virtually or in person anytime. I am within the region here to help provide technical assistance or connect dots or be somewhat of a conduit between Dunsmuir and the governor's office. And just a little bit about myself, you know, I've been in the community a long time. I've worn many different hats, as you all do, I know, within your own community here. I have previously served on the Mount Shasta Recreation and Parks District Board for many years. I currently serve on the Siskiyou County LAFCO Commission alongside Mayor Bryan. And I'm also the one who worked with Senator Daly to expand the Sierra Nevada Conservancy region recently. So this is how Dunsmuir now is part of that very important conservancy. And so I hope that you are checking out their grant opportunities. And of course, they just opened up their round of funding for the next cycle of the Forest and Watershed Health Grant Program. So it's $24 million available for that cycle. So anyway, I'll put I'll email the council members an introduction, and so you'll have a way to get a hold of me, and I'll go ahead and put my email address in the chat. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Laurel. We'd love to have you back here as a presenter when time allows for you. All right. Anyone else would like to make public comment? Oh, yes.
Yes, I would. Mark Juarez, 5744 Dunsmuir Avenue, Dunsmuir, California. Last week at the city planning meeting, there were a few points that came up, and I'd like to address them here. One was Dwight made an insightful comment about the petition that was signed, the 444 signatures. The majority of the people he spoke to had no idea what they were signing. This is consistent with also everybody I'd spoken to. They said, as Dwight also said, had they known what they signed or what it was really saying, they would never have signed it. I want to make that point. The other was Dwight also commented and complimented Christy on the research she did pertaining to the California theater. But then when asked what the clarifying questions on the research that she did, she didn't even know what the statement was. There were 12 questions in a 13th statement. It seemed clear that she didn't write this. And it also seemed clear that she, and also Mike, who was also there, neither of them had any, well, sticking with Christy, really didn't know what she was doing. And it was pretty clear later that she neither had the legal or business aptitude to have done that, or to even really do her position with the city planning. Likewise, the same with Mike, who made a lot of comments, who interrupted me when I was speaking, which was out of line. And almost every comment he made was incorrect. He was being fed information by presumably Tim Holtz and Peter Arth. This is inaccurate information, and it's really concerning that somebody is sitting on city planning, making important decisions about my buildings who are not qualified. Furthermore, it's a violation of my constitutional rights. The attempt to take private property from a citizen is taking away the freedom of not only me as a private property owner, but everybody here in Dunsmuir, and it's a bad situation. And it needs to stop. We did, on a positive note, open the theater this weekend. It was so successful, the event that we did, that we had to turn over way over 100 people. We were full beyond capacity. We stopped it at 280. We have a capacity of 296. It was very successful, and it was only the beginning of many. If the goal was to get the theater open, it's getting open. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Torres. All right, are there any additional public comments or general public comments?
This is Chrissy Demure. I'm on Zoom. Um,
I'd just say, Chrissy, briefly, as far as responding to what was said, it needs to be directed towards council. If it's a lengthy explanation of what occurred at the Planning Commission, council would prefer not to be briefed on it until it comes before us with a full report.
okay, yep, that sounds good. I appreciate it.
But feel free to proceed.
I'll prepare some comments and some responses to Mark's concerns as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate your volunteering on the planning committee, the planning commission, rather. All right, any additional public comments? All right, seeing none, I will close general public comment for this evening and respond briefly that if you have any concerns regarding any element of the planning commission's behavior and or competency, please refer your concerns to the city staff. Go to City Hall, see if you can find a time to meet our city manager, and go through the correct channels if you have those complaints. But I appreciate you being here and attending these meetings. Let's move into council and staff comments. And let's begin with our acting city manager, Mr. Michelson.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Ron, that was a great presentation of the historian report. That was super cool. Other than that, I don't have any comments at this point. Keep moving.
All right, are there any questions? Acting city manager. All right, seeing none, Sergeant Ortiz.
Thank you.
You've had a busy week.
It was busy, that's for sure. So for the month of May, where we're at as of the end of May is the city of Dunsmuir is contracted for 5,280 hours of patrol time for the 2021 and 2022 fiscal year. At this date, we have 4,811 and a half hours. 92% of the fiscal year is complete. We're at 91% of the hours to be completed. So we're on target there. I'm pretty confident after railroad days. I think that we should be in the black, at least as far as the sheriff's office goes. So we had, excuse me, 210 calls for service. Those include self-initiated activity in the month of May. That's up from last year where they had 187. We took 21 cases. That's nearly double last year of 12. We're on par with last year at 18 traffic stops. 9 citations were issued, 7 arrests were made. We are up on the burglaries. The month of May we had 4. Last May we had 2. We're way down on the disturbing the peace. We were at 12 this year and 21 last year. Domestic disturbances, again at 12, and then last year 21. Way down on the domestic violences. There were no domestic violences reported for the month of May this year. Last year we had 4. Looking at the out with the subject, that would be your pedestrian contacts, suspicious people, that type of thing. The deputies did a great job on that. They had 24 contacts versus 7 the year before. And suspicious vehicles and vehicle contacts, 13 vehicles this year versus 9 last year. The security checks on the schools, I think we've got that fixed within our computer system. They had 26 school checks last month versus 9 the year before. And then we were pretty even with last year on just general security checks, like business checks, home checks, that type of thing at 15. We only had 4 trespassing versus 12 trespassings the year before. Vandalisms have been cut in half. 3 vandalisms, we had 7 the year before. I realize that's kind of dry and boring. So we had 2 good cases or notable cases last month. We had an arson May 15th. That was at 6116 Dunsmuir Avenue, just north of the tire shop. A 30-year-old transient woman, Samantha Fajardo, out of Chico, arrived, broke into a vacant home, and decided to light a fire on the front porch. So she was arrested and consequently has already pled guilty to burglary, and she's currently awaiting sentencing, is incarcerated in our jail right now. And then May 26th was the big pursuit that everybody saw go through town. That was Deputy Decker. She had been dispatched to the Dunsmuir Brewery on the report of an unruly customer who was refusing to put a shirt on. As she drove up, the unruly male mounted a motorcycle and sped south through town, hitting, I guess, nearly striking a vehicle by the Dunsmuir Cemetery and reaching speeds she estimated to be as high as 55 miles an hour just south of, on Dunsmuir Avenue, but out of Dunsmuir city limits. And, she pursued him down to just north of Sims Road, where he surrendered, and then went out on the concrete center divide of I-5, and she and Deputy Stock were able to take him into custody. His case is ongoing. He was charged with, based on his high speeds through town, evading arrest or eluding at a felony level. It was such a danger to the public, his behavior, and resisting arrest. Then railroad days was interesting. A lot of people had a good time. We did have some vandalisms take place. The subject that vandalized the Spirits Bar has been arrested, and we've requested charges of felony vandalism against him, because I'm told there was like a $1,500 estimate to repair that window. The investigation continues for the old bank building, and we're trying to figure out who dumped over the porta potty onto the soapbox derby track and caused that nastiness to happen on Dunsmuir Avenue. So we're still looking into those two portions of it. I would press that witnesses to the bank building and the porta potty incident gave a completely polar opposite description as to the man that broke the window at the bar. So at this point in time, we're not inclined to believe that, as reasonable as it may sound that he could have done it all, at this point we have no evidence indicating that he did the bank or the porta potty, and he's solely responsible for the bar window at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, Chief Ortiz or Sergeant Ortiz, I'm curious, the group of people that came in, was there, I got a sense that there are a known group of people that wandered together and that we had some advance notice they were coming. Is that true? Or what could you just tell us about that? I know that the group kind of had two different sides. One side appreciated them, the other side didn't. But I'm just curious about this group. How do they operate? What are they about, as far as you know?
As far as I know, we were told there'd be approximately 200 hobos or tramps with rail riders coming to Dunsmuir to take part in the festivities. My perception was they were largely anti-law enforcement. We didn't arrest any of them. There was a lot of arguments. There was some graffiti I noticed, railroad type graffiti at the fountain and on a lot of our garbage cans around town. But they hung out at the beer garden. There were some misunderstandings in regards to them bringing their own beer to the beer garden. We were able to work that out, and we were also able to have them stay out of Dunsmuir Avenue and within the liquor license approved area that is the parking lot just north of City Hall. And then, as Mr. Juarez stated, a lot of them migrated up to the theater, and they couldn't all fit, so they made guitar and drum circles and whatnot on the sidewalk. And eventually everybody left. It seemed like it really cooled down to maybe 40 or 50 extra people in town around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, Saturday morning.
Thank you. Thank you for that report. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Any questions? Councilman?
No.
I just have, since this is kind of closing out our yearly to some extent, to give everyone a context of crime in Dunsmuir, because we live here, and even though statistically we don't have a lot of crime, Sometimes it feels very close because it's a small, intimate town. We know the people, we know the buildings, the places, and often the law enforcement officers involved as well. How many total arrests did we have again?
7.
The whole year?
No, in May.
Oh, May. Do we have a total for the year yet?
Not yet, no.
Oh, yeah, okay. Approximately how many arrests do we have versus cases that are actually prosecuted by our district attorney? Because I think a lot of people in town are just trying to grapple with why some people commit the same crime over and over again. And I know it's not necessarily the sheriff's office's preference, but it does seem like that happens from time to time. So if you could just fill us in on the public in on that situation.
So it's not from, you're absolutely correct. It's not due to lack of enthusiasm or interest on the end of law enforcement's part. We've got fantastic laws on the books and plenty of them, more than the average cop will ever know. And the issue is the punishment factor. Since Proposition 47 and AB 109 became enacted, that's where a lot of the crimes were decriminalized. The hard drugs overnight, such as methamphetamine, heroin, they went from being felony possession charges to misdemeanors. And now with COVID and bail reform and items like that, the jails aren't holding people. The judges aren't requiring people to submit cash bail, and they're releasing them on their own recognizance. And it used to be more of a matrix of, does this person have ties to the community, and are they a flight risk? And now it's gone from that to, is this person an actual danger to the community? If I release this person, are they a danger or not? It's frustrating for us as law enforcement as well. We routinely, there's one man that jumps to mind, I won't mention his name, but he has over 28 felony charges in less than 6 months that he's looking at with our courts. And I've arrested him twice on serious felony charges, convicted felon in possession of an ammunition. And he's burglarizing houses, he's stealing vehicles, and he's constantly let back out because he isn't what's classified as violent. And he's not the judge can't articulate that he is a dangerous person to have loose in our society. So he is released so he can continue committing felony acts on a weekly basis. I think that's a lot of what I think the citizens are probably growing a little frustrated as well, where the man stole their car and 2 days later you see him walking down the street. I think we all are good folks, which is why we're at city council meetings. And we think that you should be held accountable, but that's not the case. So,
well, as an example, is the individual who broke the window at Spirits, are they still in custody?
I didn't check on my way in, but to be frank, I'd be amazed if he is still in custody. I'd be shocked. And he was on felony probation.
When that occurred?
Yes.
Well,
And to be clear, Sergeant, that person is a local and not one of the hobos, is that right?
Unfortunately, yes, he is.
Okay.
He lives here in town.
Right, and then I have another question. I know some time ago when you were just beginning your career in law enforcement, you were stationed down here in Dunsmuir, I understand?
Yes.
And you're coming back now. You have the opportunity to see us approximately 2.5 years into our code enforcement effort. I seem to notice just a lot of changes around town. It's very slow going. Mark Allen's, has a monumental task before him. He's doing a great job. Can you speak to how you notice that interacting with your job and whether it's made it any easier, or how you see that collaboration working? Because we've got 3 sets of laws essentially we have to follow in the city of Dunsmuir: federal, state, and Dunsmuir's laws. And I know, our police chiefs have typically been well attuned to Dunsmuir's laws, but not necessarily every deputy that comes through. So if you could just speak to that relationship you've noticed in the time since you worked here originally.
Well, so I started my career at the Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office in 2014. And 2014 Dunsmuir to 2022 Dunsmuir. You folks live here. I feel like it's a safer, nicer town than it was 8 years ago today. and growing up in Mount Shasta, I remember the Dunsmuir of the 80s and early 90s, through my childhood. And Dunsmuir used to be wild, and it's really calmed down compared to the old days. And I can't say enough nice things about Community Service Officer Mark Allen. That guy he's a worker. What he has done, and it's really aided the sheriff's office, is we've had well-known drug houses in Dunsmuir for years. And Mark, through his hard work and knowledge of the code, and is just enthusiasm to take on that challenge house, where a lot of people might say, that's too much. I'm not gonna bite off that one. I'll go take a couple easy ones so I can show that I've been busy. He goes after the hard one, and by him doing that, it's greatly helped Dunsmuir. These flop houses that the drug addicts and other criminals flock to all night are now empty and being, I guess, refurbished, or they've been. I can think of two right off the top of my head that went to tax auction, and you've got good folks in there that are looking to spiff them up and live in them or rent them or do whatever they're going to do. But the fact is they're not full of criminals all night long that are in and out stealing to supply their drug habit and causing disturbances. And those people, a lot of them have left the town, period. So they are residents elsewhere, which is fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. Sorry to question you at great length. It's just good to
That's okay.
cover things in the early. Any further questions? All right, thank you. Let's move into council comments. Would you like to begin, Vice Mayor Deutsch?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just wanted to point out to the public the reason I'm not in the office, not in the council meeting. I have my 51st high school reunion coming up back in Illinois, and I'm kind of staying away from any in-person meetings just so I don't lose my $1,000 on plane tickets and everything else involved with that. So I'll be back at the next meeting. Also, I'd like to echo the good words that Blake mentioned for Ron. I thought that was a great story, and I appreciate our new historian bringing something that rich to us his first time around, as well as the photos. And I want to echo what Sergeant Ortiz was just talking about. Mr. Allen, I think, has been doing a fabulous job. I know it's got to be really hard, and there are, I'm sure, some difficult people out there, but I appreciate the way that he does stick with it. So thank you, Mark. I can give you an update. I have scheduled the community building for the afternoon, the whole day to prepare, but the afternoon of Sunday, July 24th for the volunteer fair. We decided that normally we've been trying to hold things like this on a Saturday morning, and there's a real reason to believe that most people are getting up and getting ready to do something on a Saturday morning. And I think this might be a better time. We'll give it a try. I'll be reaching out to all the different volunteer groups. I've already met with the major ones and discussed this. We'll come up with a format and everything for it. I'll also be working with the Ford Foundation, maybe to get some food and things like that there for the afternoon. But that'll be July 24th, Sunday afternoon, starting probably at 1. And then finally, and the mayor can follow up on this, but we both had a really good conversation this morning with Vive about bringing broadband to downtown historic district. And, the whole question will be about cost, but in terms of other aspects of it, it seemed to be encouraging. And there are cities apparently in Kansas and some other places that are doing this. And so the mayor and I will obviously move forward with this and come back and give you more information. And Matthew, I guess you can fill in too your thoughts. That's all I have for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman Deutsch. Councilman Arth.
I have nothing, Mr. Mayor.
I will just echo my colleague. It's very exciting. Again, we haven't looked at the cost yet, so I assume when we see that, it'll be somewhat startling. It's just going to be a matter of how, not if. We will get this done. Technology is making a lot of things more affordable that were unthinkable 3 or 4 years ago, so I'm confident we'll be able to be in the forefront of that, largely through Councilman Deutsch's persistence on the issue. I know he's been at it
Thank you.
for quite some time. I just want to thank everyone that was involved with putting on Railroad Days and the entire town for hosting all the outside visitors. I've talked with a number of the merchants, and if not outright record sales, they saw a very steady business for the most part, at least the people I talked with during that. It's really important to take a moment one time throughout the year, 2 or 3 times, and really celebrate as a town. We live in one of the most beautiful little canyons with a river flowing through it anywhere in the world. And it's cool to talk to some people who, visited here for the first time from Canada. I think there was some Sweden I talked to, and just people from Reading. I talked to people from Reading that had never been up here before for railroad days, and they were quite impressed. I think we'll come back bigger and better than ever next year. So I know you feel exhausted now, the organizers, but let's regroup, get more young people involved in the volunteering, and I hope to try to bring Union Pacific on board with some sort of railroad component next year. So let's hope for that. But thank you, everyone. It was really exciting to get to be the mayor of the town during this sort of festive days. And with that, let's move on to our business for this evening. Do we have any discussion regarding the minutes?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would note that I did mention that I'm kind of muddled by the end of the meeting. I was kind of worried about that showing up in the minutes, but I did say that. So I'm fine with the minutes as they are, but I just thought I'd bring that up.
Okay. Well, if you're fine with them.
Yeah.
And real quick, sorry, Mr. Mayor, there was some committee reports. I didn't know if anybody wanted to mention any committee reports, but I don't know, Peter, if you want to talk about solid waste at all. There was a solid waste meeting.
Sorry. Well, I brought up the minutes out of order. Yes.
Mr. Mayor and members, the Solid Waste Committee did meet. It was Blake, myself, Councilmember Lucchese. We inadvertently failed to invite Alex Bendel, one of our public members. We have a vacancy for our other public member spot. We focused on green waste days. And one of the things we were hoping to do that Blake followed up on was to work with both Clemens and with the DPAC committee. We know that we are budgeted. We have $5,000 budgeted for green waste days, but we have yet to reach closure on the calendar dates, the location, what we're willing to accept, green waste only or other items as well. And there are a number of compliance issues that affect the city of Dunsmuir as far as the Senate bill that put in motion the whole solid waste collection program for the state. And we talked about starting an education effort for the community. Cal Recycle has a number of single and double sheeted, this is what's going on at the state level, this is how it affects your community. And we at least talked about both putting together a very simple informational flyer that could go in the utility bill in one of the months ahead. And we also talked about surveying consumer attitudes as we move through this 3-year period that ends January of 2026, where by then, unless things change, we'll be going to a 3-can system. Clements will be incurring substantial costs. We need to renegotiate on a regional basis what happens after Clements picks up our waste. So it was a brief meeting. I'm sorry that Juliana isn't here because she was going to do some follow-up things as well at the county level. But we are mostly focused now on not getting too much further into the summer before we start assisting our citizens and businesses in helping dispose of green waste and making our community more fire safe.
Question?
Thank you, Councilman. Sorry, is there a question?
Yes, sir. Peter, the one thing I would like to clarify is that DPAC did come up with a vote and say they're going to leave green waste to you guys completely rather than try and wrap that into their operational. So just to let you know, DPAC is not, getting involved in setting up and running the green waste other than, saying they support it.
Well, they do have a volunteer base, and for the last couple of green wastes, our recollection is they were far more involved than our own public works department. So
Okay.
if they aren't, then we have to rethink. And of course, we have gotten substantial funding. We do have now 3 paid positions in the city of Dunsmuir. So there are different ways to go about this, but somebody has to step up and organize it. Our realistic belief with railroad days is we couldn't do this before the 4th of July, but we shouldn't wait that much longer for green waste disposal day number 1.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Councilman Art. Were there any other committees that met? I'm aware the Finance Committee met. We don't have a member.
Yeah,
here.
Finance Committee met, but it was just approval of the audit, which is coming up later, so it's fine.
Yeah, then as far as the process for the ad hoc committee to do the executive search for city manager has been pretty steadily communicating with the firm. They're handling pretty much everything, but I believe we had over a dozen applicants that were deemed qualified to go into the phone interview round with the company, and they're narrowing things down for a shortlist meeting coming up next week. So don't forget that in early July, we'll have our interview with council. I think it'll be July 7th. We'll have to confirm that. But everyone, it'll be a Saturday, and we'll probably need to devote at least 4 hours to the whole process. With the law enforcement, I did very briefly get the chance to speak with Sheriff LaRue over railroad days. On the sheriff's side, they've been busy having their lawyers review our MOU, and they're just really, as I understand it, in no condition to extend. We haven't had the chance to have all the discussions we need to have. It'll come up later, of course, but he seemed favorable to an extension to give ourselves the time to fully review something. Let's move into, we already did
I'm happy to move the approval of the minutes.
Second.
all right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Happy to move the consent agenda.
Second.
Oh, you got it there, Matthew.
I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, and the consent agenda was just a check register for the last 2 weeks. We have no old business tonight. We do have a number of items on the agenda tonight. I think we should, well,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
I'm really not comfortable, except for item D, making any sort of decisions, missing 2 members of the council, especially Council Member Lucchese, who chairs the Finance Committee. And we have more planning commissioner applicants than we do open spots. And I have a lot of questions about the sheriff's contract amendment. So unless these are extremely time critical, I'd like to put them over to the next meeting.
I actually completely concur with most of those. I think we should keep item A as an informational item, but without the Finance Committee's members here to weigh in on what the discussion was, what they, with time, were able to review. Planning commissioners, if Councilman Deutsch agrees, I think we should put those off till we have all 5 members. Because, and in the meantime, if we need a resolution for members currently serving to continue in the interim, we can do that. With the sheriff's contract.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say on the point of the planning commissioners, I think we're going to meet before they meet next, right? So we could get them on the commission in time for their next meeting in July. Would that be true?
Yes, definitely. And I deeply apologize to all members for taking the time out to be here. We do appreciate your attendance.
Mr. Mayor, have you received a copy of the audit?
I received it through email, I believe, yesterday or the day before. I have not had time to review it. It's not, a day's time is not sufficient to review the audit. And so I was already going to move, at least on my part, to not accept it and file it. But I do believe it'd be very helpful to have a brief overview of the audit's findings, if you're up for it, Mr. Michelson.
Yeah, whatever you guys feel fit. Sure.
I'm leaning towards Councilman R's plan viewpoint, but I'm open to whatever you'd like, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I have time to review it before next council meeting, so can we defer that? Unless, like, you have any just opening comments on it?
No open comments. It's been finalized, so it's been sent out, it's publicized, it's on the website, it's been sent off to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. But yeah, happy to get into more depth after fuller review for sure on council part and even having finance committee members. I will mention that Juliana wasn't at that meeting, at the finance committee meeting, but
Yeah, so
we
it's
will
even
definitely
more-
discuss it further.
Yeah, it's even more important than that Councilman Kaiser would be here if he was the one. So, all right, we'll defer that. So items A and B, we're going to table till the next. I'd like to at least open up C to at least brief the current council members on it. I do believe it's time sensitive, but I'm happy to answer any questions on it. Like, do you have any intro for this?
So the main piece here is that the contract will end June 30, the current contract. So this would amend the end date, and that's the only thing that it amends. So it would amend the end date by 1 year. It still would have to go to the county for their approval. So potentially we are going to be past, I believe Sheriff's Office would be fine with continuing services. We've already had kind of a verbal agreement of that.
But yeah, I can step in.
Formalize it.
It has been the city's preference to engage and get this contract renewed on time. Wasn't possible given the scope of what wants to be, well, what both sides would like to revisit with the MOU. And I do have the, like I said, a verbal commitment from our sheriff, clearly, and everybody within the sheriff's organization. We're not going to just stop rendering services and protecting the city of Dunsmuir. It's just we're in a much stronger position if we have this in writing. For any number of reasons. So my preference is to have it. I certainly hope we can renew a new contract long before a year from now. But this just gives us time to engage in that.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman.
Two things. Obviously, if we go into this, we'll want to have public comment, but I'm leading your way on this. I think that since we only have one thing that's changing, it would make sense to go ahead and just do this now. It's not really anything that anyone's going to disagree with, I don't believe.
I might.
Okay. Councilman Arth.
Well, I mean, so we had a report from Sergeant Ortiz, and I don't know if I got the number right, 5,280 hours for the fiscal year?
Yes, sir.
And how many hours will we have under the extended contract?
Same hours.
I guess let me back up to answer your question, Councilman Arth. There's been a lot of confusion around hours and the hours reported. The sheriff's office has a history of being proud about all the hours, quote unquote, spent in Dunsmuir. And so they'll tell us that, you know, because it's hours patrolling, et cetera. The contract is based in hours, but the practice has never, well, it has never been the full practice to equate taking care of Dunsmuir's law enforcement needs with an hourly basis. So for instance, we cut hours last time, and technically we did cut hours and it has reflected in that, but the sheriff's office has always been willing to do whatever it needs to be done. This contract caps the expense at those certain amount of hours. So part of what's being revisited, hopefully in the next year, would be, is there a better metric besides purely hours to gauge providing law enforcement services to Dunsmuir?
I assume the budgeted amount is number of hours times a dollar figure per hour.
Correct.
And is that dollar figure As I brought up earlier, the Sheriff's Association is looking for a 24% increase.
This would keep our relationship the same. All this does is take the exact terms of our contract, including the $416,000 a year, and extend that for another year.
So we're spending the same amount in a future fiscal year that we spent in the last fiscal year?
That is how the contract has been designed. You may have question marks on it.
I do.
Definitely. It's part of what needs to be revisited in our contracts. We can get something that works both for the county and for the city.
Well, I want to not just hear the sheriff's position through the city manager. I want to hear the sheriff's position through the sheriff. I don't think it's fair for us to freeload off the services of our law enforcement service provider.
Well, there's been a lot of give and take in Dunsmuir's relationship with the sheriffs over the decades. I would say in this particular case, the way I understand it, being on the committee, trying to engage in these negotiations beforehand, it's, the sheriff is a very busy person right now and did not have the time to meet with us. He has every intention, as he indicates, of revisiting this contract and getting something that works better for the city, better for the county. But if he's not willing to meet, we need to continue on. It's unfair for us to accept an increase if we're not at fault when it comes to, say, the lack of negotiations.
Well, I'll just say at this point, I would be an abstain or a no if you want to vote tonight.
Yeah, well, the year-long was just to not put any time crunch on it. I just want something on the tune of an extension. I don't want us to lapse. It's really sloppy. We know the date's coming up. We've known for months.
We've known for months, that's the point.
Years.
And now we have 2 weeks to go, and we must do it tonight.
Well, do you have any additional questions on the extension?
Yes, I want to be satisfied on behalf of the community that we will be as safe, if not safer. I don't understand.
Your choices here are between not having a contract in place and going off of the good word, albeit of the sheriff, or having a contract in place.
If you want to extend it for a month, fine. But you're not doing anything. All you're doing is pushing back the end zone.
Well, I think 4 months would be a reasonable time period.
I've heard nothing from the sheriff's side as to what they need. All I've heard is
Well,
hearsay that they're dandy.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
my question to Councilman Arth would be, what do we do at the end of the month?
Well, and I also pose that there's a committee that this council has appointed to negotiate and communicate in this relationship.
And we have nothing. I have nothing to waste.
We have the same thing we had last year. We've gotten through a year. It worked. We're going to use the same contract.
I'm in agreement with Councilman Arth that it's disappointing we're at this point where we're knowing the contract's there. As far as who's to blame for this not happening on a time scale, I have insight into it because I was the one engaging with it, but there's certainly blame to go around. We knew the due date was coming up.
I'm not interested in blame. I'm interested in the safe community.
Then I would propose you reconsider not extending this contract.
I have nothing to base my vote on.
You know,
You have a year, Mr. Arth, you have a year of experience at this contract level.
no,
You have a
actually,
year.
you yourself approved the current contract for a 3-year term, which is coming to an end. So you have the contract you approved 3 years ago. That's what's being asked, and I'm open to an extension of less than a year.
We assume our community will be as safe, if not safer, in the next 12 months. And I would like to hear from the sheriff's office whether that's a valid assumption. What if we need 7,000 hours to make our community safe? What if we have significant homeless problems, significant drug problems, more vandalism?
Peter, that's not what's being discussed. That would be negotiations for a new contract.
And that's what I thought we were doing.
We have no new contract in place. We have the option of falling out of contract altogether or extending the current one by any amount of time A year maybe is sending the wrong message, and that it seems like it's just continuing it on. There's certain benefits to us in having it a year, financial, that you've pointed out, but that's not the point. The point is to actually have time to engage meaningfully in knowing how we can improve the relationship and celebrate what is working.
And I would like to hear from the sheriff's office before I vote. That's all.
So you prefer to not be in contract come June 30th?
This is sort of like Union Pacific telling us to tear down the shed. We've got 30 days. Neither side is going to ruin the relationship we have. But the idea of simply kicking the can down the road and having a robust relationship with the sheriff, I'm not interested in that. We don't have our own police department. We're totally dependent on the CHP and the sheriff. So
Mr. Mayor.
If we had a police chief here, we would have
the floor.
If we had a police chief here, we'd have a conversation with the police chief.
Well,
But we don't.
Oh
I think
my
different.
God.
We do have an assigned police chief. He's sitting right next to you. But if you're not comfortable supporting it, it's completely your right to not support the extension of these conditions. I happen to disagree, but I have more context with it.
Sure.
Councilman, yeah, Councilman Deutsch.
Sir, I would recommend that at this point, we open public comment, and then I'm going to be willing to make a motion.
Okay, all right. Let's open public comment on the extension of the current MOU between the Sheriff's Department and the City of Dunsmuir from the 3 years to end this June to a year from now, June 2023. Anybody wishing to make public comment, please come to the podium or raise your hand if you're on Zoom. All right, seeing none, I'll now close public comment.
I move we extend the contract by 1 year.
All right, I will second that.
Technically, let's motion to authorize or sign resolution number, and I don't have the number, sorry, everybody. But a resolution of the City Council of the City of Dunsmuir agreeing to amend the MOU and so forth.
So
use the
moved.
actual language.
So moved.
All right, and I'll second it. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Abstain?
Abstain.
All right, motion fails.
No.
Carries.
No, it fails.
2-1.
No, it's not a majority of council.
Majority of council, even just for the quorum?
It would be nice if we had a city attorney in attendance, but generally for a 5-member body, if you have a quorum of 3, 2 can take action.
Okay, well then I'm happy to have it pass in that scenario, and I'm more than happy to meet with you, Councilman Ark, to go over my fuller understanding of what's going on here. And if you have a further interest, you can always apply to be on the committee that negotiates with law enforcement.
Well, I do think it's a major omission to not even hear from the sheriff's office before we do this. That's just my position.
I agree with you. I wish we weren't in that position. But, all right, moving on, we have our last item for new business, motion to authorize 1 council member and 1 or 2 alternates as voting members of the League of California Cities Annual Conference. I believe the conference is September in Long Beach this year, Blake?
Sounds about right.
I want to say it's like the 2nd through the 5th or something of that nature.
I thought it was Sacramento. Is it Long Beach?
Sacramento was last year.
There is a memo. It's September 7th through 9th in Cal Cities, Long Beach, 7 through 9, 2022.
All right, I guess the first question would be, we don't have all of the council here, but I do think I'm not 100% sure, but I think I can attend that. Councilman Deutsch, do you know if you were planning on attending this year?
I was, yes.
Okay, then I guess I would just move simply that the mayor and vice mayor be the alternates unless one's not attending.
Second. You got it there, that's fine.
On a side note, Acting City Manager Michelson, I would really love yourself and possibly the new city manager, when he or she comes on board, to try to attend that conference with the councilors that are there. I think it'd be a very good experience, and we'd better be able to leverage the resources of the California League of Cities if we had staff and counselors interacting at that time, because you have the space to really talk about some of the issues, challenges facing all the cities. So if possible, I understand sometimes it may not be.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I would also suggest that we move quickly on determining who's going and getting reservations, because the word I got through the Sacramento division is those go fast, the good locations, the close ones.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Let us move into future agenda items. We have most notably item A, B, and C will all need to return for some version of follow-up. Does anyone have any particular items to bring up at this juncture?
I have one that I'd like to throw out there, and that is that the young folks that we met at our last council meeting from DPAC, from the core organization, at some point, I think we're going to want to have an item on the agenda dealing with fire mitigation and the efforts they'll be doing, and probably have, the DPAC give us a general overview of what's being done in the area. But I don't have a date for that, but I'd like to get that into the flow.
All right, yeah, sounds good. And then there's any number of other issues coming up. I would like to, I know it's probably too soon, but I definitely would like all of council to be kept in the loop with Mossbury Falls Trail, because it is a high priority. And I also like an update on the building for a full council at the next meeting, if you guys think that's appropriate.
I do.
Because both are kind of pressing issues, half interrelated. Similarly, I know I received an email from an individual who has both been interested and not interested in our public works director position. If we could have an update on what is the situation at this point with that position, and or staff recommendation on how to proceed. All right, seeing no more future agenda items.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Is there a second?
I will. Second.
All right. Before I adjourn the meeting, which I'm happy to do, I just want to really point out how well this hybrid meeting works. Part of it probably is your advanced familiarity with technology, Councilman Deutsch, but it's really nice that we can continue to have this meeting in this capacity. So, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.